I have a question about the BRICS countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And the last year, China has been giving special importance to the BRICS. And even though the government says it's not an anti-China, anti-US bloc, many people see it this way. The last development gave some reasons for people to think like that. There was claims from the US that South Africa is giving weapons to Russia. But China wants to expand the BRICS. There's almost 20 countries already lining up to join the BRICS, mostly from Global South. And my president, President Lula, here in China said that, criticized very strongly the dominance of the dollar in the world economy. So my question is, how does the US government see the BRICS? Does it see it as a China-led challenge to the West and to the United States? Thank you.
Well, first, as a general proposition, we have long stood for the proposition that countries should be able to freely associate with other countries in any groupings that they want. It's something that we stand very strongly for and have defended for a long, long time. When it comes to the BRICS, we're deeply engaged with its leading members. In fact, this week, Prime Minister Modi of India will be in Washington for a state visit. And of course, we welcomed President Lula to Washington several months ago, where he had a very productive and constructive meeting with President Biden. So we're engaged across the board with members of the BRICS, and we'll continue to do that.
For the next question, Nike Ching with Voice of America.
Good evening, Mr. Secretary.
Good evening.
I hope you make more news from this news conference. On Taiwan, how was Taiwan discussed in your 35-minute meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping? U.S. officials have said a military conflict in the Taiwan Strait will be, quote, a global concern. Taiwan will have a presidential election in 2024. Should a democratic election be a pretext to any military escalation in the Taiwan Strait? How do you respond to China's position that Taiwan is an internal issue that is not an American concern, and upon which there is no room for compromise? Thank you. 谢谢.
Thank you. From the very beginning of our normalization of relations with China, going back to the 3 communiques many years ago, fundamental to us in that is the understanding that any differences regarding Taiwan will be resolved peacefully. That is foundational to how we understand our relationship. And for the past almost 5 decades, this is an issue that China and the United States have managed responsibly. We remain committed to our One China policy with the 3 communiques, the Taiwan Relations Act, the 6 assurances. We do not support Taiwan's independence. We've made clear that we oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo by either side. We've been clear and consistent in our policy, and it's very important that we preserve the status quo that has helped maintain peace and stability across the Strait for decades. So I reiterated that to our Chinese counterparts. President Biden has also made that repeatedly clear in his engagements with China. At the same time, we and many others have deep concerns about some of the provocative actions that China's taken in recent years, going back to 2016. And the reason that this is a concern for so many countries, not just the United States, is that were there to be a crisis over Taiwan, the likelihood is that that would produce an economic crisis that could affect quite literally the entire world. 50% of commercial container traffic goes through the Taiwan Strait every day. 70% of semiconductors are manufactured on Taiwan. If, as a result of a crisis, that was taken offline, it would have dramatic consequences for virtually every country around the world, which is, again, why there's been rising concern about some of the provocative actions that China's taken. I also made that very clear. President Biden believes strongly that one of the successful aspects of our relationship with China going back 5 decades has been the responsible management of the Taiwan question. We continue to believe that that's essential.
Next question goes to Ni Xiaowen with Phoenix TV.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm from Phoenix TV. We know for some time now the United States has been pushing dialogue with China. But at the same time, we saw the United States has included some Chinese companies to its entity list and restricted chips exports to China and planned to limit investment in high-tech sector. And China believes that the United States is both seeking dialogue and at the same time containing China. So I want to ask, how will U.S. address these concerns and to show sincerity to communicate? Thank you.
Well, as I noted, this was actually an important part of the conversations that we had. And as I suggested to our colleague a few minutes ago, it was important to me that we make clear the very clear difference between allegations that we're trying to contain China and decouple economically, as opposed to what we're actually doing, which is, as I've said, de-risking and also diversifying when it comes to our supply chains. As I mentioned, the economic relationship with China is vitally important, and also, when it's fair, a very positive thing for countries around the world. And at a time when countries are trying to rebound from COVID, something the United States has done very successfully, we want to see growth, we want to see success in every part of the world, including, of course, in the major economies like China. It's in our interest. But at the same time, as I said, it's not in our interest to provide technology to China that could be used against us. And at a time when it's engaged in a buildup of its nuclear weapons program in a very opaque way, when it's producing hypersonic missiles, when it's using technology for repressive purposes against its own people, how is it in our interest to provide those specific technologies to China and other countries?
Well, that's the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who is wrapping up his China visit. Hugely consequential comments there from the Secretary of State, in some ways calling a spade, saying there are no illusions about the relationship that America shares with China. Also saying that we have a long history of managing difficult and consequential relationships, and we will continue to do so as far as China is concerned. Making it very important difference there, saying that we are not decoupling from China, but we are de-risking. Also talking about some of the hurdles in the relationship, particularly as far as Taiwan is concerned, saying that we support the one China policy, that there is absolutely no unilateral shift in that policy from America's side, but saying that we understand that there are issues when Taiwan, as far as Taiwan is concerned, but we remain committed to the one China policy. He repeated that even in the Q&A, also urging China to take a more stronger position when it comes to North Korea in de-escalating tensions in the Korean Peninsula, saying there is common ground on issues like climate change, food security, and other issues as well, with both sides can work together, even though many issues remain between the two sides, and differences are something that will continue, but there will be more visits, he said, from American officials to China as this relationship will continue on the path of growth. He says the trade relationship between the two sides has remained steady throughout the last 5 years. A huge difference here is that U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had visited visited China 7 times. This is Blinken's first visit in the last 5 years. So the difference there is clear.